Hey everyone, welcome back to Titans Talk, the series dedicated to DC Universe's Titans. Today we're going to be talking about episode number 6, titled Jason Todd, and of course he is a major focus of the episode, but we also get a lot of the other Robin, Dick Grayson. It is very much the story of the two Robins, but let's go ahead and get into it. Now, the story of the episode is, if you remember from episode 5, Jason Todd does arrive at the end to help Dick Grayson fight off that sort of unknown organization that works with Dr. Adamson and possibly trying to find Rachel for what reason we do not quite know as of yet in terms of this story. So this episode picks up right where that episode left off, with Jason and Dick sort of teaming up, being able to go off. They take Dr. Adamson off to a secret location. They actually take him to one of the hiding spots, or like safe houses, that Batman has set up, one of the multiple ones that apparently he has set up all around the place, or world, or city, I'm not entirely sure. But they do take him to a safe house, and we sort of get a little bit of backstory as well to Dick Grayson. I like that a lot in this episode, that we sort of explore his time at Haley's Circus a little bit, that he did have other relationships other than just his parents. He had like friends there and some other things. So the reason why Jason Todd comes and finds Dick is because a lot of those people and past acquaintances of Dick from Haley's Circus are being killed off for unknown reasons. And he's sending those pictures of those people that are being killed to Robin, believing that Dick Grayson is still Robin. So essentially, Jason is trying to help Dick in finding this sort of killer, as he is the most current Robin. Now, I finally have to admit that I am finally getting deep into Titans. This is now the third episode that I actually really liked a lot. They're actually on a roll right now. This feels like the show that I actually wanted to be in terms of storylines, action, all sorts of things. They're finally coming together to create a great show. Now, let's go ahead and first talk about Jason Todd, the character that this episode is essentially named after, as he does tend to take a lot of the primary focus, or at least the primary storyline, along with Dick Grayson throughout the episode. Now, last week when we were introduced to Jason Todd, he's actually played by a gentleman by the name of Curran Walters. I was not that overly impressed with his first impression, but then again, he was very limited in terms of what we actually got to saw in that last episode. In this episode, because he does take a primary focus, I actually ended up liking him a lot more than I ever anticipated liking him. He had that charisma that I just didn't really expect, that sort of cockiness, but also that sort of dark side to him that Jason Todd has and will eventually come full circle with his backstory. But I think he does have a lot of those traits of Jason Todd that I just was concerned he wouldn't have, but he's actually able to pull it off very well. And his dynamic with Dick Grayson, the original Robin, is actually really great. He considers him very much a hero, but at the same time, Jason Todd is very much his own character, having his own inner demons, and a lot of other things that are kind of holding him back, or at least incorporating into his storyline. And speaking of Jason Todd's background, let's go ahead and delve a little bit deeper there as well, because I think that is actually one of the great storylines of the Batman franchise. Now, obviously, Jason Todd takes up the mantle of Robin after Dick Grayson's departure. Now, in this series, Dick Grayson is still having the mantle of Robin, while also Jason Todd sort of has it while still with Batman. So he's essentially his replacement, if you will. Now, the history of Jason Todd is actually he was attacked and killed by the Joker in the Death in the Family storyline. What's most interesting about that is actually DC put out a poll at one of the end of their comics on what they should do with Jason Todd. And out of 10,000 votes, a narrow 72 of those votes determined Jason Todd's fate, that he would be killed off instead of being kept alive. So I think it was really interesting that DC actually used a poll and incorporated the fans' decisions into the storyline of Jason Todd. Now, Jason Todd would later come back after being resurrected in the Lazarus Pit by Ra's al Ghul, and he would eventually become the badass we all know as Red Hood, which again is another fantastic character that I absolutely love from the Batman universe. I think that it would be really interesting to see those Red Hood tendencies and see Curran Walters return as Red Hood later on, but I think that he's still young enough that he's still Robin right now, and I think that that storyline might be a little bit far off in the future, especially if we want to incorporate it back into Titans, but he could easily come back into the fold. But what's most interesting about the Jason Todd storyline in terms of Titans is that because Dick Grayson, is still holding that mantle as Robin, but still being separate from Batman, and Jason Todd is being Robin off with Batman, essentially there's two Robins. And that causes a lot of conflict because Dick has this sort of inner struggle that he doesn't want to be Robin, yet he continuously goes back to the costume. So I think that Jason Todd's coming to Dick Grayson and presenting him with this problem, showing that he's Robin, and his relationship with Bruce and a couple of other things, nuggets of great things that we get throughout the episode, I think is going to be the catalyst for Dick Grayson to finally put down the cape of Robin and pick up the mantle of Nightwing and start being his own superhero, doing things his own way. I really hope we go that far and get to see that sooner rather than later. But I think that Titans Season 2 is already possibly greenlit, so it's possible that they could wait for a later season, or maybe wait till the end of this season before they actually go ahead and start doing a little bit more of that Nightwing storyline. Now, in terms of acting, the two Robins, which I'm going to go ahead and call them for now, were hands down the best part of the entire episode. They actually do take a bulk of the performance. We do get to see a little bit of Raven, like a little bit. We get to see a little bit of Beast Boy, who has a great joke that about having two Robins and how he's super excited about that. Starfire's there a little bit, but it's mainly the story of the two Robins. And I really like their performances a lot. Everyone did pretty much a good job otherwise. I finally got to have Starfire put on a pair of pants. They're still purple. Her outfit's still a little bit crazy, but at least it's a little bit more sensible than what she was wearing for the past 5 episodes. At least in my opinion anyway. Definitely not the Starfire we know, but she finally is sort of getting a little bit of a change of outfits there, which I think is good. But overall performance-wise, I think that the Kern Walters and Brendan Thwaites Robins are hands down the best part of the episode and definitely the highlights here. And going back to the story and the action, there was a couple of fight scenes were actually really cool. Jason Todd has a couple against a couple of cops, which is really badass. Brendan Thwaites has some against the main bad guy. There's a bunch of really cool fight scenes and some really decent action that's sort of scattered throughout. It's not necessarily the primary focus of the episode, like maybe like the nuclear family fight was last week, but I definitely think that they were able to incorporate some action element while still trying to keep a good amount of story and development here. And they definitely were able to develop the story overall. I did like the story a lot. My biggest complaint about the episode, however, also relates to the story. And it's not necessarily because the way the story was written or performed or anything like that. It actually goes back to the episode felt very serialized or like very focused. It was mainly focused on the dynamic between the two Robins and Dick Grayson's backstory and his relation with Haley Circus and all of that stuff. I did like that a lot because it did allow for some world building, not only with Jason Todd's relationship with Batman, different gadgets, a bunch of other great things. Being able to see Dick Grayson's relationship outside of being just his parents or Bruce Wayne, which we're all familiar with. He actually had friends in the circus as well. So at least we got to see a little bit about that. We got to see Robin confronting more or less his parents' killer. There's a lot of deeper things here that actually added to the episode. But it was so focused that I feel like it was very one note in the sense that these characters like Jason Todd and the character of and developing Robin's backstory was just sort of a one-off. We're probably not going to get to address it later or have those themes sort of carry on throughout the character. We get to see why Robin's a little bit darker, I guess, but we don't really get to carry those themes throughout unless he just goes ballistic on somebody and kicks the shit out of them. There's just nothing that carries through. I feel like Jason Todd does definitely, and I definitely hope he does, have the potential of returning to the series at some point. Whether he's still Robin or developed into Red Hood, I don't know, but he does have that potential. But other than that, there's really nothing in this episode that's going to carry on to the next episode. It wasn't like a cliffhanger like last week where Jason Todd's Robin gets introduced, and then we're going to have a story about that. It just felt very one note. I don't really know what's going to happen in the next episode or have something to look forward to continuing the story. It's going to feel like it's a completely different story than this episode, and it's going to feel very disconnected, which is my biggest complaint, is that it's as great as I love the episode, it just didn't feel like it was going to be connected with the previous episode. Well, it did connect with the previous episode, but it's not going to connect with the rest of the season or even probably the rest of the series for that matter. And that's my biggest concern, is that they're focusing more on as if it's a standard sort of TV series and not necessarily a streaming service series streaming service series are a lot easier to connect those episodes. Take, for instance, Daredevil season 3. Almost every single episode is connected. Even that one episode where we find out about Karen's backstory, relates back to something else in the series. This one, it's going to feel very disjointed and not going to feel connected, other than the fact that Jason Todd helped Dick Grayson with getting Dr. Anderson. Other than that, that's all the connection is going to be. And I feel like that's what's most frustrating about this episode, is that as great as it was, it's going to be one note at the end of the day. And to be quite honest, if it wasn't for that strange feeling that this episode gave me, I would probably give it a much higher grade than I probably would want to give it now. I still definitely want to give it a great grade, but just that sour taste and weird feeling that the episode gave me, that's just the thing that's kind of holding it back. But the overall grade that I did give the episode, because I did like it so much, it had great action, a great storyline that I was actually engaged in. It gave us some great world building, not only on Jason Todd and Batman's side, but also in Dick Grayson's past. The overall grade that I have to give episode number 6, titled Jason Todd, the overall grade of an A-. Overall, I would have to say that I was actually very happy with not only this episode, but the past 3 episodes. They've actually developed a great story in Titans, and like I said before, have actually made me want to watch the series and look forward to it and not dread, is the next episode going to be bad? I actually have had a great time these past 3 episodes, and this is the show that I've been wanting since episode number 1. Now, the downside is based on previews for next week. It looks like it may be curving back to not a great episode, but of course that's just based on a preview. I don't necessarily know yet. I'll be able to find out more next week. So make sure you subscribe so you can tune in next week to find out my thoughts on episode number 7, which is going to be called Asylum. But other than that, that's all I have for now on episode number 6, titled Jason Todd. If you have seen the episode, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.